Got it. And just speak a little bit about how the vital role that you as volunteers in the park play. It's like, as Juanita, our executive director, says, democracy is messy. And I liken it to answering a collect call. Those of you that are old enough to remember when we had collect calls, someone would call you and you would have to pay for the privilege to have them call you. And that's kind of what we do as volunteers in the park. We spend our time, sometimes we spend our money, a lot of times we spend our whole weekends trying to make the parks better and advocating for our neighbors and friends. So I think I only have a minute, so I will be seeing you. Enjoy the conference. Please reach out to us with issues, because Friends of the Parks is an organization that is motivated by the actions and activities of the community. So we need to hear from you to help give us direction in terms of where to go with our advocacy. So with that, I'm going to hand it back over. Enjoy the day. Peace and love. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Keith. It's great to have Keith in a leadership role. And one of the things that we're trying to do today is also share with you about kind of the background of some of the folks who are leaders with our organization. And Keith is a former VIP award winner himself, and he'll be helping us give out our VIP awards later in the program. And he's still active with the Garfield Park Advisory Council, where he was in leadership when he got that VIP award, though he moved to the South Side. And, you know, I guess a bunch of Southsiders on our board. We gotta get some more Westsiders since we've lost some of our folks. I'm gonna say a few words of my own, and then I'm going to help us transition into a bit of a panel discussion today. I think it's going to be very rich. For those of you who don't know me, my name is Juanita Irizarry, or Juanita Irizarry, whichever one you can pronounce. Often how I introduce myself. I'm a Humboldt Parker, 50 years of my life within walking distance of Humboldt Park, right along the Humboldt Boulevard area near Palmer Square, as well as part of my heritage, although now gentrification has moved me a little bit further west. Humboldt Park is still my neighborhood park, but I have to get on a bike or get in a car or take a very long walk to get to Humboldt Park these days. And that gentrification is actually one of the really big contexts of our work in Humboldt Park. And one of the reasons that I would often say, when I heard people say parks are democratic spaces, I would be like, what does that mean? Because to me, as a Humboldt Parker, as a Puerto Rican who has felt displaced from the park and has felt like there's a bit of a battle over whose park this is, the statement that this is a democratic space has often not felt like a comfortable statement to make. Yesterday, we had a lot of conversation about what does it mean for parks to be democratic spaces in the context of racism, in which African Americans were not able to access certain parks in Chicago. And those kind of conversations are really a big part of why I, in my leadership role of Friends of the Parks, asked the question, what does it mean for parks to be democratic spaces? So we've been having this conversation over the last 6 years now. This year, it's fun that we get to have the context of this being the bicentennial of, the birthday of Frederick Law Olmsted, who talked about parks as democratic spaces and whose legacy we remember in Jackson Park, the Midway Plaisance, and Washington Park, which we spent a lot of time talking about yesterday. So today we are going to set some of this conversation in other park issues that we're all dealing with. And I'm going to start it out by talking about Humboldt Park, my home park. We have a lot of reflecting to do, and We'll come out with a more formal statement very soon, including at our Park District Board meeting this week. But Friends of the Parks is indeed very concerned about the illegal construction that has begun in Humboldt Park for an extension of the National Museum of Puerto Rican Arts and Culture. And it's a very complicated issue. And part of what we do at Friends of the Parks is say out loud a lot that most of the things we deal with are not binary. They're much more complex than that. And we need to spend a bit of time kind of peeling back the layers of the onion. And so I started this conversation talking about the challenges of gentrification in Humboldt Park, in part because our response to what to do about this problem is that oftentimes fights in Humboldt Park end up getting set in the context of the hipsters who move into the neighborhood versus the Puerto Ricans, right? And so here I am in this moment as executive director of Friends of the Parks, who's also a Puerto Rican, who has been really deeply involved in Puerto Rican community building, community organizing for many years to try to make sure that our community is not removed from the Humboldt Park area and from the park, which is really a space where we celebrate our culture. For us, it's where we come together for the annual Puerto Rican festivals. It's a place where, to this day, when the weather is warm, you just pick a Sunday evening and you can go to a certain corner of the park that we call El Corrillo, and you most certainly will find older Puerto Ricans playing salsa, having their congas out there, maybe having some amplified music, which there's a fight about, but there'll be a bunch of us who will very much enjoy going out there and listening to some salsa music and celebrating our culture. And it's very important to us. It's very important to me. At the same time, we also feel like there can be problems with process, right? And so many of us are struggling with how do we both say we love the National Museum of Puerto Rican Arts and Culture. I'm a donor. I've been a donor as recently as the pandemic. I sat for a long time on the Puerto Rican Agenda, which is a group that really supports the work of the museum and has tried to make it what it is today. How can we value those community processes where we're trying to make sure that our community has voice in these, what happens to our community and our park, but also say, this has not been done the right way. Friends of the Parks has also been struggling with how we look at this relative to our positions taken around the Obama Center. And we chose not to sue around the Obama Center. In part because we did not see an effective legal basis in that case. And in part, as we were trying to understand how we listen to community and engage community around the best possible outcome there. Well, per our conversations so far at Friends of the Parks, we do potentially see a legal basis to step in and stop the further construction of the National Museum of Puerto Rican Arts and Culture building, which they say is foreign archives, but in the documents we have reviewed, which have come through FOIA efforts that some of our partners have led, it does not seem they have been truthful with the State Housing Historic Preservation Office and with all of us about what they're actually trying to build there, which is much larger than the footprint of what they articulated originally to the SHPO office. So we are pursuing what it would take to have a legal strategy to stop that. And we're very clear about that. At the same time, we are also talking about what does it mean organizationally to take the time to sit and have a lot of cups of café con leche with my fellow neighbors in Humboldt Park who are concerned about how this has happened and what does it mean to find a way forward which allows the museum to find a good alternative, right? Which we think would be a building for an archives that is not in the park, right? And we've honestly heard a lot of our neighbors say that. One of the other complicated issues that I have been trying to help our staff and board know about my community is that the Puerto Rican politics in Humboldt Park also very much connect to the status of Puerto Rico and debates about whether Puerto Rico should be independent, remain the same, or become a state. and people line up around issues in my community based on their opinions about those things, right? So we are navigating all of that and trying to figure out what it means to have folks who are independentistas, as we call them, who are really the folks that support most strongly the National Museum of Puerto Rican Arts and Culture. Where are the people who are statehooders? Where are the people who are fine with it just staying the same? And have all of those folks standing with us to say, we love Puerto Rico, we love the Puerto Rican expression in Humboldt Park and in our community, but we think that this is not the right way to move forward in terms of helping this museum be as effective as possible to support our culture. That's what we're working on. I share all that with you because we believe democracy is messy at Friends of the Parks. And this project, this how to address the situation is also messy. So these are the things we're working on. And I share that in part because oftentimes people come to Friends of the Parks and say, you just need to put out a statement against this. And that's just what they want, right? And sometimes we do that. And sometimes we say, even though we agree with your statement, we are looking at all the different angles. What are the different ways that we might fight this? And what is our end goal? And the end goal is certainly, let's not build new structures in parks, right? But we also are looking for parks to be part of a healthy democracy and our own health, right? And so for me personally, I think about what does it mean for Humboldt Park to be healthy in the midst of all of our complicated Puerto Rican politics, in the midst of our larger, complicated politics as a country, in a moment when fake news is all the rage and people really choose to believe whatever they've decided to believe, oftentimes regardless of actual facts. And how do we use this moment to model the processes that we would like to see around decision-making around our parks? So we are certainly engaging the Park District. We are engaging the State Housing, I always say housing, State Historic Preservation Office, SHPO, who is going to start a consulting party process around this issue, which we have asked to be a part of. We are talking to state legislators, our congressperson from that area, who also happens to be my personal congressperson, and we're going to take that on. We wanted to share that because people have been asking us questions, and our position is there should not be a new Walmart style box built in the middle of Humboldt Park, because that's kind of what it looks like. And we hear lots of folks in the neighborhood agreeing with that. The question is, how do we get it to stop in the way that doesn't feed into this fight between hipsters and Puerto Ricans in Humboldt Park as to whose park it is and whose neighborhood it is, right? And how do we also not promote this? Is this a statehooder or is this an independentista project? No, it's a project for all of us. And we want this museum to succeed, but not with a big, ugly new building on park property, right? So that's what we're aiming for. And we will look forward to talking to you all more about that as we move forward. And I personally have worked extremely closely with former Alderman Billy Ocasio in my own 3 decades of work in the community, a lot of it around affordable housing, which used to be my main area. And we're also looking for how do we do this in ways that don't harm relationships more than we have to, right? So that's the work that is going to be upon us in the next many months. Honestly, it's not the only legal matter we're working on. There's so much that we've got on our plate. But we share that in the spirit of, man, democracy is messy. And we say, this is our Parks is Democracy ? Luncheon and conference, because we're trying to create space together to talk about what it means for parks to be democratic spaces, both in product and process, right? So we've also assembled today a panel of other folks who are working on some complicated issues. And we always invite folks to this session without the expectation that Friends of the Parks organizationally even has to agree with the positions that will all be represented. But we think it's important, and I'm not saying we don't, I'm not saying we do, I'm just saying that's the spirit of it, right? Folks are allowed to say what they're working on in the community level and lift up issues, right? So that we can all be part of vetting these complicated non-binary issues. So we're excited today to have some panelists representing a number of issues throughout the city. And we are going to give them each about 5 minutes to share. And as we've mentioned to them and to other folks that are part of this agenda today, at the very end of our session, we're going to have some discussion under what we call our on the table discussions, which actually started with the Chicago Community Trust offering as part of their 100th anniversary, the idea that we should all sit down together around a table and talk about issues about how we can make Chicago better together, right? So there's going to be a good amount of time later in the day to talk about more issues, and that session will be managed. If we go too long now, we'll talk about some more things there. So we don't want to feel too much stress right now if we go a little bit long, but also know that we won't get to all your questions during this panel discussion. Please put comments or questions in the chat. We will capture some of them there. We will see if we can address some of them in managing this discussion. But then we will also carry all that we're hearing into that conversation and beyond as we work towards creating candidate questionnaires for our municipal candidates. As you all know, we're going into our municipal elections, mayoral and aldermanic, and we want to have everyone tell us what they are working on that we think could be useful as we work on a citywide questionnaire, but also questionnaires that we hope will be used at the ward level. So that said, we have a few friends with us today, and I'm just gonna introduce them one by one as we get them started. But Amy Lardner, who's an old friend, and I don't mean the word old, of Friends of the Parks, who is working on an issue in Lincoln Park. And I'm just going to let you take it away, Amy. Tell us who you are and what you're working on.
Well, hi, I'm Amy Lardner, and I do consider myself an old in many ways, having just turned 60, my goodness, but love Friends of the Parks and big supporter. But little did I expect 2 years ago to become what my friends now call Heron Brockovich. And the story I'm here to tell you about is how that happened and how I became embroiled in a story that has to do with administrative processes affecting public park stakeholders who can't speak for themselves. And in this case, I'm speaking about the Illinois state endangered black-crowned night heron. Now, some of you might know that we have here in Chicago's Lincoln Park the last known breeding population of this species. All of the other rookeries in the wild have been lost due to all kinds of reasons, including habitat destruction and loss. We've lost over 90% of our wetlands. And the really interesting story for these particular birds is that they originally came from the Calumet wetlands. So they started coming up to Chicago around 2006. And interestingly, they'd been a special bird to me because my very first project in Chicago was working with Open Lands in Chicago to design a marketing brochure to talk about all of their programs. And in 2004, fresh from New York, that was the first I'd heard of black-crowned night herons. And as the project manager, I kept getting their name wrong. So how weird it is that these years later, I find myself in Lincoln Park, the birds start nesting here, I fall in love with them. If you've not seen them, you should definitely come up next spring. I'd love to give you a personal introduction. They're wild, they're magical, they're messy, they're poopy, they're smelly, they're noisy, and they raise their families together in a community. And so here I'm in a stage in my life where I'm thinking about intentional communities. So I'm also like, wow, these herons have really kind of a cool thing going. And so Lincoln Park became their home. Now, in terms of administrative processes in the Chicago Park District, so even though I was involved with Friends of the Parks, I was pretty naive. So as an observer, I saw that Lincoln Park, the South Pond restoration, it affected the first place the herons nested. And the Illinois Department of Natural Resources, this is a state endangered bird, was brought in to consult. And they made plans to how do we do construction and protect the herons so we don't affect them during nesting season. They're highly susceptible early in nesting. So that happened. And then the birds moved to the alley of trees south of South Pond. Well, That was great in some senses, but park users hated it. Again, there's a lot of poop and they couldn't use the park, and it was a big conflict. So for many reasons, including emerald ash borer, the Chicago Park District and the zoo came to Lincoln Park Advisory Council and said, we got to take these trees down. Okay, so they worked with the IDNR. Again, people, field people. These are conservation biologists who specialize in restoration and recovery of endangered species, came and talked to the park district. They talked with, the zoo. They figured out how to do the removal to minimize impact during nesting season. And by the way, even though they're state endangered, presumably they're also protected by the federal bird protections because these are migratory birds. Don't want to get into all the details, but again, here I was, I'm like, these birds are really cool. Okay, so these things are changing, but IDNR is keeping an eye on them. So imagine my surprise in November of 2020, when I first heard through Block Club Chicago that the History Museum was doing a project to renovate 5 acres of land. Well, the birds by that point had kind of created 2 rookeries. So most of them had ended up in the zoo, but about 45 pairs were nesting at the Chicago History Museum. By then I'd become a piping plover monitor. So this idea of birds and protecting them was kind of important to me. So got my attention, and I reached out to the birding community and I said, do you know about this project? And they said, we don't know about this project. We need to know about this project. So long story short, we had a call. This is November of 2020. This first public meeting that Block Club, first public meeting that Block Club announced was that they're getting final approval for this project to begin in March. So there wasn't a lot of time already. And we had a call, the birding people, and I was part of it with History Museum. Their spokespeople said, oh yeah, we've talked to the IDNR, we're good, it was approved. They said no adverse impacts. Now on the call was a great person, if you don't know her, she's marvelous, the founder of the Chicago Bird Collision Monitors. I've also been a volunteer with that group. And we negotiated that because I live nearby, if this was not going to be a problem, we knew that herons still fall out of nests. So somebody needed to keep an eye on them. The zoo people, COVID, not enough staffing. So I volunteered. So I expected, and this was pretty silly, but I thought, like Walter Mitty, I've got my bird net. I'm going to go in there. I'm going to rescue baby herons. I'm going to keep them out of harm's way. Well, unfortunately, instead, what happened is that the birds came back, they nested, they hatched eggs. They abandoned all of the eggs by early May. And I was really sad, but I'd been under the impression that the IDNR had approved this project. And so, who was I? What else could be done? So fast forward October of 2021, Bellbolt Prairie was under attack. And that's a very important remnant prairie. And something caught my attention. And it was that something had been missed. When the IDNR looked at the project, they didn't know about endangered species on the site. Ding, ding, ding. What do? I call the IDNR. I'm horrified to learn the IDNR had no idea the birds were nesting there. None. And that means that no real evaluation had taken place of what the construction project's impact would be. So that's where the Heron Brockovich part comes in, and I'm working away on my computer and I'm like, what to do? And I get the conservation biologist people, they're very interested and concerned. At the IDNR, there's a protocol, right? They have to take it over, write up all the documentation. This was already many months after this impact had taken place. So, any criminal investigation, you need the evidence to be fresh, right? So the eggshells were long gone, the dead baby birds. I couldn't present all of that information. The person on the conservation biology team did his best, and he presented the case to the IDNR's law enforcement people, and they said, yeah, too complicated. Yeah, Chicago. Yeah, we're involved in hunting and fishing. Yeah, it's not that big a deal. Yeah, not a big deal. So that only made me more committed. And so when the IDNR finally said in February of 2022, they weren't going to investigate further, I started a group called the Chicago Black-Rudd Night Heron Project. And since that time, I've been following up with the IDNR and the University of Illinois and building a coalition of concerned conservationists, because I realized the people who really care about this stuff are the people who are doing like wetlands restoration and working on with the Chicago Park District, which ironically now owns the same Calumet wetlands these birds had originally nested in way back when. So there's a theme there. But if we think about it, the fact that the birds now nest exclusively in Lincoln Park Zoo, and I can't speak for the herons, it's kind of interesting, they chose the Pritzker Family Children's Zoo. It's a real problem because it interferes with the zoo's mission. This past year, there was a high of over 719 birds, adults counted, and over 400 chicks were hatched. I mean, it's been fabulous for me as a volunteer monitor. I go to the park, I talk to people about the birds. People really are fascinated, but it's a challenge. And so while it's good news that the university is pursuing research project, there's going to be a project starting next year with the IDNR and with the zoo people to figure out where they go, with the hopes of encouraging them to start nesting elsewhere. And my personal hope is that we can see them nesting again in the Calumet. It would be wonderful. You know, any concentration like that is dangerous. You don't want all your eggs literally in one basket. So the conservation challenge is how can we get them in other places to nest for the state of Illinois and for their recovery. But we have unanswered questions remaining that relate to our work together as Parktivists. The questions relate to process. They relate to organizations that are siloed. It relates to, do we have a process in which important stakeholder considerations are brought into the decision-making process early enough to make a difference? The surprising fact that I've learned is that had the IDNR been consulted, and by the way, the History Museum project, some people really are very fond of it, but it's created a very favorable environment for private event revenue rental. And I'm not saying that's a bad thing, it is what it is. So the History Museum has this great space. It's no longer conducive to heron nesting. But if there had not been a fear of what might come of having an open conversation, if the public had been brought in instead of having the first public meeting before the park project got final approval, this is a theme that we have seen played over and over in different scenarios. The people who know about certain things in parks aren't brought into the discussion. We're not provided the opportunity to avoid some of these adverse effects. So I'm excited to have the opportunity to discuss this further with you later on today. And thank you so much for taking the time to listen to me. And thank you to Friends of the Parks for inviting me to speak on this topic.
Thank you, Heron Brockovich. I love that. That's so awesome. And for pointing out the process issues, which are really a big part of concerns, regardless of what the actual issue is. So, all right, well, we're going to turn quickly to Alfredo Romo on the south side to talk to us about some concerns related to McKinley Park and the Matt Asphalt plant and the Matt Asphalt Company. So Alfredo, take it away. Thanks so much. And by the way, former VIP award winner, Amy, as part of a Chicago bird monitoring project in another setting, and Alfredo and Neighbors for Environmental Justice, or N4EJ, also a former VIP award winner. So thank you all for all your ongoing great work on behalf of Chicago's parks. All yours, Alfredo.
Muchísimas gracias, Juanita, for this invite and also for the rest of the organization here. And it's very nice to see that, you know, activism continues to be, you know, something that makes the change, right? So that's something that we have realized here within McKinley Park when it comes to addressing environmental justice issues. And one of the things that we have learned through the Mad Asphalt campaign is that there's a lot of work to be done. And if I may, I would like to introduce, you know, M4EJ to this particular space, speak to who we are, you know, what our goals is, and the fight that we're currently in. So my name is Alfredo Romo. I am the Executive Director of Neighbors for Environmental Justice. M4EJ formed in 2018 as a community-based organization in McKinley Park. This is a beautiful neighborhood that's located pretty much in the middle of Chicago. Our mission is to educate, advocate, and organize with our community to accomplish environmental justice on the southwest side of Chicago, particularly. And our current work includes EJ work in public health campaigns, environmental education with schools, research, air pollution monitoring, and community response activities. Our goals really is, once again, to continue to educate our community about EJ work in environmental health. We are definitely continuing to identify and address neighborhood environmental impacts. And we're seeking to increase transparency and have meaningful community involvement on any developments or activities that may affect their environment and or health. Another piece to our work, which has been very significant, and this is something that we are very focused and firm, is to continue to ensure that our elected officials, city departments, state government are held accountable in environmental justice. Just because we are seeing that, right now we're just speaking to all those processes, they're really failing these communities. Another thing that we have done as far as an organization is that we continue to participate in a multitude of environmental justice and public health campaigns. These campaigns provide us with a platform to help bring and spread awareness on environmental racism, cumulative impacts, unjust and inadequate zoning, transportation and permitting processes to McKinley Park residents and neighboring communities. This is something that we have learned as far as, Mad Asphalt campaign. This is a company that came in to our community with a what they call a constructional permit, seeking a 5-year operating permit. And this is when we got involved. We just couldn't comprehend as to how every level of city governance and state bureaucracy completely failed to protect a community that is already labeled an EJ community and is already dealing with overburden pollution from multiple companies and diesel transportation that continues to encapsulate our community. So this is something that we have learned. We have made, one of the things that we have done in the last 3-4 years of organizing is that we have connected those dots, right? I think about the Hilco campaign in Little Village. I think about the General Iron campaign in the Southeast side. So Neighbors for EJ is also part of the Chicago Environmental Justice Network. One of the things that we're doing here is to continue to address, environmental legislation at the state level. So we are working on the EJ permitting bill. We need to strengthen environmental regulations and policy in order for these marginalized communities to be protected from heavy industry. Another thing that we are currently doing is addressing the issues within the city. When you talk about cumulative impacts, we need to make sure that we need to address that. Anything that has to do with land use, zoning, any developments that are coming into these communities, we need to be part of the table because at the end of the day, we're the ones who are paying the environmental consequences of such development. A lot of people, will say, well, we need economic development. But once you start to analyze, that so-called economic development, we realize that, much of that economic development comes in with labor exploitation, and it also comes in with bringing environmental degradation to the communities that are hosting them. This is the case that has been happening with Mad Asphalt. Mad Asphalt right now, if you can believe, was constructed right in front of our beautiful McKinley Park. This is a 72 acre open green space. And it's not just an open green space, it becomes a community center where McKinley Park residents attend, but many other neighboring communities also flock this beautiful, beautiful green space. So that's one thing that we're trying to bring awareness that this is not just a hyper-local issue, right? Of course, the people that live here are the ones that are being impacted on a daily basis. But then there's people, as I just mentioned, people that come to this park from neighboring communities, and also people that come from other areas of the city that work here. I think about the local schools, I think about the teachers, I think about the student body. We have about 7 to 5, schools, local schools, and 5-6 daycares. Most of these schools and businesses, they used to bring their kids frequently to the park, not because of Mad Asphalt's operations. Now I'm starting to see that they're, not really attending the park as they used to. So once again, we're talking about the air quality here. which is very important to us. And we're trying to do the best that we can in order for us to contain Matt Asphalt's impacts. So right now we're actually concerned that this company came in with the pretense of being a minor source polluter, and now they have the capacity and the equipment to become a major source polluter. So they're seeking $500 million city contracts. We were able to get involved in the procurement processes of that issue. So we were able to pretty much pump the brakes at this point. But the work still remains. You know, we don't know what's going to happen with that particular process in the next year. So we're going to be pretty much seeking support and solidarity in order for us to basically block that level of that magnitude of city contracts. Another thing that we were able to do is we were able to get involved in the permitting process at the state level. So this company, as I mentioned, received a construction permit, but the IEPA rejected their operating permit based on our public campaign. So once again, all of this to say that, you know, activism does really work. Organizing is what really, you know, pushes that needle. So, you know, we need to continue to stay connected, to speak to one another, to organize, and to really strengthen the resolve of these communities that are being impacted, you know, from, once again, from heavy industry. Now with that, we're also now concerned that Matt Asphalt, the operator or the owner, is now seeking to buy the Damon Silos, which is a property off the I-55. So when we talk about land use and zoning, this is another issue that we're concerned. We don't trust this, you know, Michael Taden. We don't trust the city. We don't trust the states. So we need to continue to apply that pressure in order for us to make sure that, you know, the community is heard. Once again, right now there's negotiations happening between Michael Taden Jr. and the states, and we're not part of that those discussions. So anything that has to do with development, implementation, and enforcement, that's something that M4AJ has mustered the courage and you know, and sort of our way of organizing in order for us to make sure that we're applying that pressure to the city, to the state, and also to these bad operators. With that being said, you know, we have done many other things here in the community. We're also trying to you know, provide environmental justice walking tours to invite people from the community, from, you know, other communities as well, to come in and to feel the direct impacts of living next door to a very active industrial corridor. But that's one of the things that we're saying, right? That these industrial corridors, they're outdated. We do have about 26, 24 industrial corridors across the city of Chicago. And one of the things that we have learned through this work is that many of these corridors in the north side have been modernized. And so what's happening is that they continue to redirect that dirty industry into the southwest side, into the southeast side as well. So these are communities that are already overburdened with pollution, and we don't need more developments that continue to implicate our daily lives. I think that one point that you made, Juanita, that really resonated to me is gentrification. So that's another part that we're also starting to address. One thing is that, you know, we do see two forces happening here, addressing the industrialization of these communities, but also environmental gentrification. So these are two areas that it's very complex, very complicated, and we certainly would like to, you know, continue to be part of those discussions, because at the end of the day, you know, whether it's through our health or through our socioeconomic, you know, means, we're getting pretty much marginalized, right? So I think that that's one of the things that has to be highlighted, and that's one thing that, you know, we're trying to do as an organization. But yes, you know, all of this to say that, you know, if I can bring it back to this space, McKinley Park, it's a beautiful space that, you know, you were to think that the Park District will be, you know, being, you know, attentive to this issue, supportive of this issue, and that's not happening. So that's a little bit frustrating to see that, you know, the Park District is sidestepping this particular campaign, and they're not helping us in addressing, you know, the elephant in the room, if you will. But yes, thank you so much for the invitation, and I'm looking forward to the discussion at the end of the conference.
Thank you so much, Alfredo. That's really helpful. And we signed on just the other day to a letter asking the state to not move forward with the Damon Silo sale, and a number of other community folks are asking for there to be a thought process about another potential park at that site alongside the river. So there's so many park issues here. And thank you so much to N4EJ for the great community-based work that you guys are doing there. It's so inspiring. All right, we're going to go back up to the north side and hand it over to Lara Weber to talk to us about Wells Park and challenging issues there, also about use and maybe revenue and a lot of the same themes. You know, folks sometimes say to us, you know, oh, well, my issue is so specific to my community. And we're like, well, when we hear folks talk all across the city, we often find themes that, you know, regardless of the community, there are some similar themes, both in process and often product as well. So Lara, please, thank you so much for reaching out to Friends of Parks. And we're so glad that we're able to have you share with us today. Take it away.
Great. Thanks, Juanita, and thanks to Friends of the Parks for inviting me to be part of this. I come to this part, this side of activism from a history of being a journalist. So for several decades, I worked at the Chicago Tribune, and I hope that through my work on that side of the fence, I was doing, you know, the journalist part to help raise your voices. And that was always our mission, was to try to give, you know, voice to the voiceless. So since I've been away from the Tribune over the last year or so, it's given me an interesting opportunity to get involved in the community in a way that I really kind of couldn't before. And so where this is pulled me in is literally right across the street from my home office. I'm staring right now at Wells Park, and I spend so much time over there. I've lived here for about a decade now, and, you know, walk my dog over there, use it to meet up with friends. During the pandemic, it was truly a lifesaver for so many people to be able to gather and sit outside safely and meet with one another. So what's happened here in our little north side community, we're up in Lincoln Square, which is a pretty, you know, affluent neighborhood, and one that has gone through a lot of gentrification over the last 20 years or so, is that we're dealing with a little crunch of space in our tiny little Wells Park. So Wells Park, if you're not familiar, it's about the size of about 2 city blocks. It's pretty small, but it has a very active community center with basketball and a swimming pool. And there's a beautiful gazebo in one side of the park. And then about a half or 2/3 of the park is devoted to ball fields. And that's wonderful. And I think everybody, including me, like, loves seeing all the baseball players here during the summer. I mean, there's, you know, it's a very cool thing to see all the little guys out there, and girls too, playing baseball and softball. But the reality is that the organization that runs the leagues of baseball is pushing now to expand its use of the fields in a way that is creating a lot of pressure on the neighbors. And so they have proposed to install 60-foot tall LED lights around some of the ball fields across the street. So this has been going on really for years. And I want to just go back a little bit here and give some history. This organization is called the Wells Park Parents Association, and called the WPPA. And it runs the youth baseball league here in Wells Park and in 7 other parks around the north side. It was started around 1990, when after the Park District used to run some youth sports here in the park. And they were growing more popular as more families were moving into the north side and starting to want to have these activities for their kids. So the Park District consulted with a group of parents of some of the baseball players and worked out an arrangement so that the parents would sort of take over management of these leagues, because the Park District was running into its own resource issues with being able to manage that. So it was a good solution that, you had this very active group of parents and families and, residents around here who wanted to be involved. And so they took over the management of that, but it quickly, they within a few years, they formed their own private nonprofit organization to handle this. And the baseball program has grown exponentially pretty quickly. So fast forward now, and you have a league that is drawing players from throughout the North Side. We have, players who come and play with the WPPA from Lincoln Park, from Lakeview, from, I think, some of the suburbs, bring in kids. There's from Evanston, Oak Park, there's kids who come in, from all over the place to play in these parks right here in our little North Side pocket. Awesome, great. So there's real demand, and like I said, super fun. Right now, they play from about 8 in the morning, and these start in the middle of the week in the summer and run through Sunday. So they'll start around 8 in the morning and play till around 7 o'clock, because at least here at Wells Park, we don't have lights, and so there's a natural cutoff time when the games need to end. Okay, so there's been a balance here in our neighborhood, even though a lot of the neighbors, it gets to be a lot when you live right across from the park, and the cars, the SUVs are coming down the street and they're dropping off their kids and they're double parking and they're causing little traffic jams, but it all sort of resolves and it kind of works. And, and so all of that traffic tends to just flow through and be done by dusk, basically, because the games end, and which works well in this neighborhood because we also have a really thriving retail environment here too, and like restaurant and activity environment. So the Old Town School of Folk Music is just around the corner. The Davis Theater is just around the corner. And there's, I'm embarrassed to say how many nice restaurants are right here around the corner, and they're wonderful, and they make this neighborhood, the special thing that it is. But they rely on people being able to come in. The neighbors certainly support all these places, but for instance, the Old Town School, has a robust faculty of teachers and students who come in from all over the city and the suburbs as well. And so their schedule tends to involve classes and concerts that start around 7 or 8 o'clock at night. Same with movies, as it's like you go to a movie after dinner, and you go to dinner around 6 or 7 o'clock. So right now it's tight, but it works. And so the traffic from the baseball, they're there all day and all the people are there, and that's great. And then they kind of leave, and then all the traffic comes in for everything else, and it's wonderful, and the restaurants thrive, and the Old Town School thrives, and the movie theater thrives. So now the WPPA is proposing to put in lights, which would allow them to extend their game days on many nights of the week till at least 9:30 at night. So we started, hearing about this, and some of our neighbors were just hearing little inklings of this, because this is something that the Baseball League has floated in the past to previous aldermen, and those aldermen have said over the years, well, no, there's this balance, and so we want to retain this balance, and so this is not a good idea for this park. There's other parks in the city that have lights and it works there. For here, it would upset this balance. So not a good idea. But now our current alderman is Alderman Matt Martin, who is by all accounts a good guy. And but he is being particularly open to this idea. And so he hasn't expressed his thoughts one way or the other, but the project seems to be moving forward at a pretty fast clip. And so some of the neighbors, we started hearing about this during the pandemic only because of, like one person who was on the Park Advisory Council, was hearing it come up there and started spreading the word through word of mouth. So slowly, but urgently kind of too, those of us who were hearing about it started spreading the word and talking, among other people when we were walking our dogs or out in the neighborhood or talking to merchants. And what we quickly learned when we started looking into it was that this project is pretty far along. And, there's been a lot of research already done and kind of worked out between the WPPA and the Park District. And the talking about the process, we were pretty stunned to learn that, that there were no in-person meetings being held with the community. There were no really concerted efforts by the Alderman's office or by the Park District to go out and seek true input from the neighbors within a few blocks of Wells Park. And so, so now suddenly I'm not in the journalism world and I can have a voice again. So I'm working with some other neighbors, and we realized that this is something that we needed to spread the word on at the very least. And so there was, we learned that the Alderman's office had asked the WPPA, had asked the very group that was seeking the lights, approval. The Alderman asked that group to go out and do an information gathering, and disseminating program and kind of like an informal survey around the neighborhood about this. Well, that, that just seemed ludicrous, frankly, to most of us. It was like asking the tobacco industry to go out and do a survey about smoking. Lo and behold, the WPPA said that they knocked on all these doors and that they found 89% support for the lights. And when we heard this, and most of the people who at that point were on a remote call with the Park District and the Alderman's office, were hearing these results during a presentation from the WPPA. They were asked to give a presentation, we weren't. And we challenged that. And we said, first of all, most of us had not had our doors knocked on. And a couple who did, one gentleman who did said that he opened the door to find a WPPA person standing there with his two kids in their baseball outfits. And, and he's supposedly asking for or providing unbiased information about this and soliciting questions. So, not surprisingly, the neighbor felt very uncomfortable sharing his real thoughts on that in front of these kids. So quickly, we have put together a loose, in the matter of a couple of weeks, we formed a neighborhood group. We're an informal group. We don't have a name. We don't have, anything beyond just a sharing of contact information that we're trying to make happen. We put together a flyer that we have, passed around just through neighbors who we could find to help hand these out. We've distributed about 500 of these around the neighborhood. We asked neighbors to provide feedback to the alderman and the Park District. They had asked for that. They had put out a little form that people could fill out, but they, as far as we could see, they didn't do much of a good job of letting people know that that form was there for the feedback. So we did our best to try to generate that feedback. Our deadline was this past Monday, and we think, we can imagine that hundreds of people filled out the online survey. We also collected handwritten forms too from a lot of people, and were able to drop off, I think it was like more than 150 handwritten feedback forms from our community here. So what we're learning through this process is that there hasn't been a transparent process, first of all. We're not sure, where the alderman really stands on it, but he is absolutely letting this march forward. We're not being given clear information about when a decision will really be made. We were given a December 5th deadline for feedback, which we complied with. We did our best. We're still trying to kind of raise the roof on this. And we just don't know. We know that the Park District has been working with the WPPA, that they already know kind of where the electrical lines would go in for these lights and all of this work. So there's clearly work happening to make this move forward. But when we ask, we just get stonewalled, basically. We get told, oh, we don't know, nobody knows anything. So so we have just now been trying to raise attention around this. We're concerned that the WPPA, in part of their proposal, what we find significant, and which touches to some of the gentrification issues that you were talking about earlier in money, they have raised a couple $100,000, I think, to pay for these lights. And so a significant part of their proposal, and what they're very proud of, is the fact that they would pay completely for the lights. And we're saying, we don't think that that's the way to go in a public park. This is a public park for public use. We understand that public partnerships can be really beneficial, but we also believe that there should be some public money or some public stake in anything like this, because with something like this, and it comes naturally, an expectation that the WPPA will have some say over how the lights are used. Things like, we've asked for things like guarantees or some kind of rules written about use of the lights and like time limits and things like that. All they've been able to say is like that they have basically kind of a handshake agreement that they turn the lights out at 9:30. We don't really buy that that's going to happen most of the time. We have been talking with a lot of the merchants and retailers around who weren't fully informed about all of this, and are understanding now that that crunch in the time at night is going to lead to a parking squeeze that maybe eventually, and in some neighborhoods it's happened this way, would lead neighbors to ask for permit parking. So right now we don't have permit parking, and that's one of the real benefits to a lot of the merchants. They love that people, not just their customers, but that their workers can come in and there's such a service industry staff that works here at all the restaurants, and that they have a place to park in our neighborhood. If it becomes residential permit parking, that's going to complicate all of that, and they're not happy about that. So I didn't even talk about the environmental impact of any of this, which I think we all have asked the aldermen to have some kind of environmental impact study done, putting in giant LED lights at this point in our world conversation about climate change just seems kind of ludicrous to us as well. As a solution, we're trying to offer the idea that, the WPPA is saying that they have a wait list that they're trying to accommodate, and that's why they want to expand the game times. So, okay, you need more games, you need more space to do that. We're suggesting expand the number of parks that you work in, reach out into other parts of the city. WPPA is already in 8 parks, and that's fantastic. They're all kind of clustered up on the north side. Identify some other ways that the WPPA can show that it's interested in revitalizing and investing in parks around other parts of the city that maybe don't have all of these great fields already. So that's where we are right now. We're hoping to go over to the park board, the commissioners meeting this week. Yep. And we are looking for support and your suggestions as well. And I see a lot in the chat, and I'll read through that too.
Yeah,
so thank you.
This is really great. And I think it's important to mention that sometimes folks who hear us talk about equity work a lot feel like we're not addressing concerns in neighborhoods like Lincoln Square or Lincoln Park. But when you share these stories, it's an important moment to recognize how similar the issues are everywhere, right? process wise, is this the right park? They've done this under, kind of under the radar, right? Do the people with the most money to pay for a particular amenity get to be the ones to decide what amenity should go in that park, right? That said, we're going to switch over to Anton Atkins and talk a little bit about Douglas Park and Riot Fest. But before we go over there, I want to say I used to live just for a couple of years right across the street from Horner Park. Like literally, I could watch people playing tennis on the tennis courts from my living room. And Horner Park is very close to Wells Park. And it's a much bigger park. And there's a lot of baseball activity there. And it's great, but it makes sense in that park. And there's parking for that park, right? And so a lot of the questions are not about whether people, oh, you don't like my kids or you don't like sports activation. It's about how are the decisions made about which are the right parks to carry what burdens, right? So we ask a lot about whether parks should be carrying the burden of this kind of thing or big concerts in parks and mega festivals. So we're going to switch over to Anton, where we've seen some progress this summer with a change at the park district level and some of their policy around how to decide about mega festivals, but it maybe isn't enough, right? So Anton, tell us your story. We got about 5 minutes. We will take some of the issues that come up to the discussions we're going to have a little bit later after we present our VIP awards. But Anton, wrap up this panel for us with just a little bit about what you all did this summer, which was awesome, and kind of what your opinion is about what needs to happen next.
Yeah, sure. I want to start the same way, respectfully as everybody else. Thank you, Juanita and Friends of the Parks, for the invite. Good afternoon to everyone. It's wonderful to hear your stories, to know that there are other people who are in this struggle with us. And there are other people around the city who are fighting, particularly for the needs of the community. That's great to hear, always great to hear. As mentioned, my name is Anton Atkins. I am a third generation North Lawndale resident. My grandparents came up here in the mid 60s. I live on the same block in the same house that my grandparents have always lived in since they've been here in Chicago. So I like to say I'm a legacy resident. We now have 3, 5 minutes, I want to cut to it. As they say, cut across the field and get to the point. We now have 3 mega festivals here in our park. Historically, there's really never been such a thing. Former alderman years ago, Michael Chandler used to hold kind of a back to school type of festival. No streets ever had to be closed off for such a thing. There used to be somewhat of a festival for Cinco de Mayo years ago. That closed off. So we never had these big events, but something changed once Riot Fest was kicked out of Humboldt Park. There is articles that show.
Sorry about that.
No, not at all. That was a good thing. There are articles that prove that our former alderman, Michael Scott, will say, sure, we'll take it. So there's always been this weird dichotomy of aldermanic borders and community. So the place where the festivals take place is technically within the 12th ward with George Cardenas, but it's in the community of North Lawndale. So as mentioned before me, what Ms. Weber said, we don't have a formalized band of people. We just got together because a lot of us have been doing individual work over these past 7 years. And a lot of us from not this past festival season, but the one prior back in 2021, a lot of us just found each other and say, hey, you're against it, I'm against it, let's get together. And that just kept happening almost in a chain reaction. And we did a lot of work this summer where we beat the pavement, we made a lot of noise, a lot of different articles, interviews, petitions that went off. We got over 2,000 signatures. We got almost 500 signatures from Riot Fest attendees saying, we love the festival, go somewhere else. And I've made it clear myself that I'm not against music festivals at all. I'm a musician, I love music. But there's a difference when we have music that's for profit that comes to the detriment of community members. I've learned this past year that more than one thing can be true at a time. It's really hard in this political world that we live in. It's a right or wrong, right? North Lawndale is 87% Black. And we know that with that happening, there are a lot of things systemically that has affected people of color, particularly Black people within our country. I heard earlier environmental is one of them. One of the issues that we suffer through. Housing is another issue that we suffer through. One that when Dr. King came to Chicago in the mid 1960s, he said, this is the most racist environment he's ever experienced in his life. He stayed on 16th and Hamlin, a place that exists now, to fight housing through slumlords. That's an issue we still deal with today in North Lawndale, in Chicago. We see education as a problem. There are so many things that are here. And what our alderman, I always stress our alderman, because for 7 years, he has gone under the radar unscathed. Our alderman has allowed this to happen. And now with his stepping down and the appointment of his sister, we know that in Chicago, that's rare, right? Nepotism is a thing. She wanted off merit, of course. Her sister, who came from the Chicago Park District, it seems that there's something going on as far as a plan that was made that needs to be continued. I saw in the chat earlier, it said that the Park District seems to be about money. I think that too. Thankfully, our state rep, Lakeisha Collins of the 9th District, she got us within a meeting, a few community members with Superintendent Escareño. And what was passed along is that, hey, the Chicago Park District needs to make money. And I told her, I said, hey, I understand, I'm a business owner. I have a storefront business. I know what it means to get revenue, to keep your doors open. But I implored her, I said, please don't do that at the expense of these residents. Because that's what's been going on. And I said, sure, you're not the one who has had the rain all of this time. You just got here. But I said, you're in a position now to do better, to be better. And I don't think we're in I don't think you're in a position where she has said, not everyone is going to be happy. And I said, that's a compromise that us, the people in this community, we cannot give that. We can't go with compromise. I've spoken with several candidates for our ward who say, hey, we need compromise. And I said, no, that's the same compromise that we've had for 7 years. And that compromise has been silence. So within starting this community organizing journey, what I have tried to do is really get our residents to not be apathetic. What's important is that you care. What's important is that you're willing to say something. Yeah, it's uncomfortable. Excuse me, I'm only 30 years old, but I'm a student of history. I had a conversation with my grandmother before, and she was saying, "Hey, protesters, it's uncomfortable." I remember years ago, there was some people protest on Lakeshore Drive, and she's like, "I wish they get out the way, because people need to go home." And I said, grandmother, you're right on one front, but the other front, people need to be seen and heard. It's uncomfortable. When Dr. King marched from Montgomery to Selma, or sorry, vice versa, they walked on the highway. Yeah, I'm going to be in your way. I'm going to be seen. You need to hear me. I'm going to take you out of your daily routine so that you can understand the issues that we have. And that's what we did this summer. Excuse my Hungarian, but we raised hell. And we plan to keep doing that. As Juanita kind of alluded to it, the Park District changed some of their policies. We want to see if there's actual equity that will be put into there as far as this community input. Are you guys actually going to listen to us and take some of the words and what we're saying to really enact change? What are you really going to do? And if you're not, we'll be out there again. We're not going away. I heard some people asking about park advisories. We technically have one. It is completely inactive. The last post that they made on social media was June. They didn't even meet then. I don't even know when they met last. We don't have any advocacy in Chicago City Council. Yes, it's definitely a common thing. Our city council members, both Scotts, brother and sister, are inactive. They follow from our estimation, they follow the money and whatever it is that they have been told. There's no real group within our community, within North Lawndale specifically, that is on our side. We are thankful for Lakeisha Collins and her work and her advocacy. She's the only person that we have, but she can only go so far. So I tried to, and I'm going to close here. We have tried to do our best to stand up for the people. And I remember I was blessed enough to do an interview with Juanita, at WTTW this summer. And I remember very clearly, she said, oftentimes these people have these type of festivals and communities where they think the folks won't fight back. And I think they learned this summer, we might not be in that community anymore. They're talking, they're saying something. They're finding us and they're sending us emails, they're calling us, they're talking to us in person. They're using their resources and contact to do something about it. Last thing I'll say, and forgive me, I'm Baptist, so we get 3 close, right? Last thing I'll say is that legendary Dr. Barbara Sizemore, who used to be with CPS, used to be a head of Washington, D.C. public schools and Pittsburgh. She said, the Constitution gives us individual rights, but we defend them as a group. So that's what we're looking to do. We're looking to defend them as a group. We have rights and they will hear us. It's as simple as that. They'll hear us. Our community will belong to us as it does now, and our interests will be heard. And it's as simple as that. No compromise, no giving up. So again, thank you so much, Juanita, for the invite. I love all of you all and the work that you are doing. It encourages me. So even if you think nobody's paying attention or you're not getting anywhere, know that Anton hears you. I love it. And I feel your power. So yeah, thank you again.
This is so awesome. What a great panel. And let me say, if you're ever in the western end of the Humboldt Park neighborhood, which is by my house, stop by Café Calidad, which is Anton and his wife's coffee house. She's Guatemalan. Get some good Guatemalan coffee over there. I don't know if it's Guatemalan coffee, but I know it's Guatemalan style coffee. Yeah. So I had definitely stopped in there. At the time, I didn't know it was Guatemalan. The same Anton. You know, I'm like talking to this guy, and it turns out, hey, that's Anton, the owner of the coffee house, the same Anton guy, part of the Rican Fest stuff. So that's totally awesome. So yeah, go catch a cup of coffee over there. What, near Kimball, North Avenue, just west of Kimball. Anyway, Kimball Holman. What a great panel. So many issues that definitely feed into our candidate questionnaire conversation. So whether or not we get to have a long conversation about that at the end, all the issues are being raised up here. We're getting all the juices flowing, all these really great comments in the chat. Thank you so much to all of you. And as I think you can all see all the common themes and threads that that come through there. And we are also, as Friends of the Parks, doing what we can to support specifically the issues that have been brought up today and to give them airtime. And we encourage you all to help out with that as well. So we're going to turn to our Volunteers in Parks Awards presentation. It is always our pleasure to lift up folks who are doing really cool stuff in supporting Chicago's parks. Sometimes they don't even know who Friends of the Parks is, but we know who they are, and we find out that they're doing really cool stuff. And it's a really neat opportunity to inspire and help mobilize others towards this kind of great work. So at this time, I'm going to turn it over to our Director of Environmental Education and Engagement. Her title has changed, something like that. It's a long title. And a number of our board members who are also going to be part of our presentation today. Some of them are former VIP award winners themselves. And so we are just excited for you to meet them and for all of us to meet one another. So Elvia, take it away. And I know our Deputy Director, Jen, is helping us behind the scenes with a PowerPoint presentation with some slides. And I can't promise you that the final order of the pictures and the final order of the narrative ended up the same. That's not anybody's fault here today, but we may have to flip back and forth a little bit to make sure we have the right slide to go with the narrative, and I will just say, let's all have grace with each other, but lots of really great stories you're about to hear right now. Elvia, take it away.
All right. Thank you so much, Juanita, and thank you to all of our panelists. Your stories have really motivated us this past year and helped us, keep things going. And hopefully we've helped you all connect and we can see greater things in the future. So now we're going to turn to our volunteers in the park, our VIPs. And to start it off, we're going to go with our Park Advisory Council Leadership Award, which is awarded to members of an advisory council that have made a significant contribution to their park and community. So for this award, it goes to Milton and Dorothy Chandler of Park 581. And if you were to look up Park 581 on the Park District website, you would find the following description along with a photo of an open field. And it says very simply, Park number 581 is 8.74 acres and it is located in the Morgan Park community area. This is a passive green space for you to enjoy nature. But once you dig a little deeper, you will find that the prairie, as the neighbors refer to this green space, which only officially became a park 5 years ago, has so much more going on. Now, with Milton as treasurer and Dorothy as a chair of the Community Garden Committee, Park 581 PAC has had the remarkably successful run since its founding in 2021 in the midst of the pandemic. In addition to the community garden, which is supported by a Connecting Communities Award, the PAC has installed a little free library, hosted several cleanups, including participating with the FOTP Earth Day, a post-4th fireworks clear up, and an It's Your Park Day. They've also installed pet waste stations to help the families with their four-legged friends. This PAC was even one of 21 finalists for the Chicago Works grant. So definitely a lot happening at this little space. And right in the middle of all this activity are Milton and Dorothy. No task is too big or too small for them. Their contributions are so many, from volunteering at the cleanups, planning and designing for the community garden, distributing community surveys, attending workshops to improve the community, making several bank runs as treasurer, and keeping meticulous records. They are also the first to volunteer when needed and are highly respected and loved in their community. Their selfless acts have benefited the park and community by making it safer. They've even implemented a phone tree and worked closely with their CAPS officer in the district to keep an eye on the park. They walk the park every day to exercise and carry a bag to pick up garbage along the way. This incredible couple is a testament to community love, care, and devotion. Thank you, Milton and Dorothy Chandler, for your dedication as part of Park 581 Park Advisory Council. And you can congratulate them, do a little response, the little reactions on the emoji reactions on there. Congratulations. Our next award is to Park Advisory Council. It's an awarded to an advisory council who has made significant contribution to their park and local community. This year's honoree is the Grant Park Park Advisory Council. The current iteration of the Grant Park Advisory Council emerged after a struggle a few years ago with the Grant Park Conservancy to ensure that the Park Advisory Council is a separate, public, accessible entity. Ensuring public participation towards the best interest of one of the largest parks in Chicago, the PAC advocates for the balance between Grant Park as a major tourist attraction and the local park for downtown neighbors. Often referred to as the city's front lawn, Grant Park consists of more than 300 acres that span from Randolph to Roosevelt and from the Lake Shore to Michigan Avenue, with attractions that include the Art Institute, Buckingham Fountain, DuSable and Monroe Harbors, and the Lakefront Trail, along with dozens of art pieces that are scattered throughout the park. This park was some of the earliest designed open space for the city, which its most famous advocate, A. Montgomery Ward, fought for 30 years to keep forever open, clear, and free. The council takes the role of protecting our front lawn very seriously. With the Lollapalooza contract renewal and the announcement of NASCAR race running through the park, this year the PAC has played an especially big role in advocacy, serving as a consistent check to ensure that the local community voices and needs are not pushed to the side in the name of profit. Council members regularly testify at Park District meetings, and 2022 has seen a good number of media appearances as well, voicing concerns and holding the Park District and the mayor accountable for keeping Grant Park accessible and safe for all Chicagoans and visitors. And this year has included a review of concerns related to the Grant Park Van Buren Metro stop, the renovation planning process, and the kickoff of a new Grant Park Framework Plan steering committee, a process in which various Grant Park PAC members are involved. They also regularly checked in with members of the Mayor's Museum Campus Working Group to promote consideration of needs related to coordination and seamless connection between Grant Park and the museum campus in adjacent Burnham Park. This is on top of the regular activities like leveraging the significant resources of Grant Park area residents and other volunteers to pull off large Earth Day park cleanups and advocating for more programming at Maggie Daley Park, to name a few. Thank you, Grant Park PAC, for fighting for Chicago's front lawn for all of us. All right, and now I am going to, and now I will turn it over to our board member, Deborah Strauss, to read the next few awards.
Good morning. Good afternoon, sorry. The Community Organization Award is given to community groups or organizations. Do you want me to do? Who's first?
You are correct.
No, but which award? River
Oh,
North?
I'm sorry. Yes.
River
Yes.
North. Okay, there it is. The Community Organization Award is given to community groups or organizations that have made a significant contribution to their park and local community. The River North Residents Association, RNRIA, is a volunteer-led nonprofit community organization working to protect and enhance the quality of life in River North. Key to their success is encouraging strong collaboration and communication between residents, businesses, and government officials. Through their leadership and advocacy efforts, RNRA created several committees comprised of civic-minded residents working together on a wide range of issues affecting the neighborhood. These include a Commerce Committee, Development and Land Use, Family, Pet Owners, Public Safety, River North Clean Streets, and the one FOTP is most familiar with, the Parks Committee, which stewards a Montgomery Ward Park. Years ago, FOTP and RNRA worked together to rename that riverfront park near the old Montgomery Ward headquarters in honor of Chicago's defender of an open, clear, and free lakefront. We have continued in relationship over the years as RNRA's Parks Committee plays many of the roles of a park advisory council, advocating for and stewarding the park, including participation in our annual Earth Day cleanups and also in the Chicago Parks Foundation Pitch In for Parks. This year, they really ramped up their advocacy for Ward Park and other riverfront green space opportunities in the midst of Chicago's casino siding process. After the city announced plans to bring a casino to Chicago, RNRA became the most prominent neighborhood association, working with Alderman Riley and Hopkins to vigorously oppose the Bally's Tribune site casino development with the potential impacts on the small Ward Park across the river, and the inadequacy of green space in the plan being among some of their key concerns. Since the City Council approved the proposal, RNRA has remained actively engaged in encouraging changes to the plan to reduce negative impacts to the surrounding community, the residents of Chicago, and the natural environment. And just this week, we learned that the latest response to their advocacy is Bally's scrapping of its plan for an outdoor concert area in favor of a riverfront park and a dog park, in alignment with some of RNRA's demands. Thank you, River North Residents Association.
Yay, thank you so much.
Next up is the Advocacy Award. We've been hearing about advocacy all afternoon. Every one of the efforts you're hearing about is clearly an advocacy effort. And that's a theme of our conference and of the people we're hearing from. Our award is awarded to community groups, organizations, or individuals who fiercely advocate for their parks and local community with elected officials and civic processes. I'm going to take a moment on this one because it is one of my two main parks, along with the Midway Plaisance. And I just read today that it's 84 years old, the limestone revetment that is the focus of the work right now. And I thought it was like 150 years old, because that tells me I've been around in the neighborhood for at least half its life. And that was an amazing statistic to me. I've been to, besides personal life there many times, I've been to a wedding there, not the Lucas wedding, a memorial service for a Parks advocate. And it was there that I watched the 2017 solar eclipse, along with many neighbors. For 22 years, community members have fought for Promontory Point. My bumper sticker reads, "Save the point again." So it's a long fight. In that time, there has been much overlap between advocacy for the Promontory Point and Friends of the Park's own board of directors. There's at least 4 of us right nearby. This year, the Point Conservancy held a press conference announcing and designating May 26th as International Point Day, celebrating the past and present of Promontory Point, which is cherished by Southsiders and former residents all over the world, and fighting for its future as a beloved park for generations to come. At this celebration and press conference, Friends of the Park's now board president, Bronwyn Nichols-Lodato, and board member Mila Marshall were highlighted speakers. It is because our connection runs deep that we could not let another year pass without honoring the tireless work by the Point Conservancy. The mission of the Conservancy is to protect and preserve Promontory Point in Burnham Park on Chicago's south side, most especially its historic limestone, stepstone revetment, and renowned landscape architect Alfred Caldwell's prairie-style design. The community group cares for this unique sanctuary in the city, serves as the de facto Park Advisory Council, including hosting stewardship days and working to protect all its unique historic features. Maintaining the historic integrity of the point is not just an asset to Chicago history, but to protecting the city against lakefront erosion caused by climate change. These advocates know full well that democracy can be messy. They have been rolling up their sleeves and getting to work. They have relentlessly pursued support from elected officials, government bodies, and others for their cause. This year has been one of victories and setbacks for the Conservancy. Since 2013, they have worked with U.S. Congresswoman Robin Kelley and her team to submit language for a preservation study at Promontory Point. Congresswoman Kelley this year secured language in the federal budget authorizing funding of the much delayed and much needed independent third-party engineering study of the historic limestone revetment at Promontory Point. The budget still needs to be approved, and the Conservancy continues to fight for this federal funding. Locally, in response to all the energy around the first International Point Day, the group was able to offer Mayor Lori Lightfoot a guided tour of the point and secure her public support for a preservation approach to the repair, restoration, and rehabilitation of the historic 84-year-old limestone revetment. In the last week, the group gathered over 500 letters of support for the point to be added as a Chicago landmark. These are a few examples of how the persistence and community engagement of the Conservancy is paying off. It is clear that they will continue their commitment and passionate advocacy for the Chicago Park for years to come. Without their resounding voice and powerful organizing, the point would not be what it is today, a beautiful and historic source of respite from city life for the Chicago community. And I see Jack Spicer, Deborah Hammond, and Michael Scott of the leadership of the park, and Bronwyn's of the Conservancy, and Bronwyn Nichols Lovato, Friends of the Park's board chair in our audience today. Thank you, Point Conservancy.
Yay!
The Stewardship Award is awarded to individuals who work to beautify and improve the natural assets in parks. Susanna Ripstein is a key figure in the fight to safeguard the South Shore nature ecosystem and increase environmental equity at the South Shore Cultural Center. A member of the Park Advisory Council, she convinced the Chicago Park District of the need for an organized volunteer stewardship efforts at the South Shore Nature Sanctuary, which led to the first full year of organized monthly workdays in 2018. She has continued in this labor of love despite pushback from politicians who have labeled the sanctuary as dead, and in the face of its potential demise due to the proposed PGA golf course related to the Obama Presidential Center. It certainly isn't dead. I can attest to that after a trip very recently. And there's another name attached to this golf course effort, Tiger Woods, which should not be forgotten when you hear about what the other side of the conservatory is proposing. That's editorializing. The South Shore Nature Sanctuary is a 6-acre natural area, open year-round, located on Lake Michigan behind the South Shore Cultural Center within the Chicago Park District. Established in 2002, the South Shore Nature Sanctuary was at the time only the second lakefront Chicago Park District natural area. The peninsula on which the sanctuary is now located was previously a part of the grounds of the country club, the South Shore Country Club, and had been neglected for decades as an overgrown dumping ground. The South Shore community expressed their desire for a lakefront natural area during the development of the Chicago Park District's 1999 South Lakefront Framework Plan, and it came to fruition with the support and input of South Shore neighbors, park advisory councils, and birding groups. Construction began in 2001 and included the removal of invasive plant growth, installation of a recycled plastic boardwalk, and 2 Jens Jensen-inspired council rings, along with the planting of numerous native trees, shrubs, and wildflowers. As one of the earliest natural area installations in the city, it is now well established and mature and contains dunes, prairie, and woodland, and the creatures that inhabit them. Susanna played a strong role this year in the 20th anniversary celebration of the Nature Sanctuary, including leading tours for the 80+ people who came out that day. She is always happy to show people that the sanctuary is very much alive and well and worthy of being preserved. She is quoted in the Sun-Times as saying, "I love spending time at the Nature Sanctuary myself because it's beautiful, peaceful, and a special way to feel connected to the earth right here in the city." I also know that natural spaces like this one are crucial to the mental, physical, and social well-being of my community, especially since South Shore and the rest of the South Side of Chicago has been so disinvested over the past decades. I wanted to start a community stewardship program at the Nature Sanctuary because I saw that not enough people knew that this resource was there for them to take advantage of. And I wanted to do what I could to change that and make sure that the space remained protected and beautiful for everyone to use. For example, people would tell me that the space was abandoned because the landscape wasn't as manicured as the rest of the park. So there was an opportunity to help educate community members about the philosophies of natural areas management, and also to provide a voice for the community back to the Park District, expressing those concerns and needs to the people who manage the space. By increasing the usage and appreciation of this vital lakefront ecosystem, Susanna is fighting not just for the future of the sanctuary, but also for the future of our lakefront, ensuring that this vital guard against lakefront erosion is protected for years to come. Thank you, Susanna.
Yay.
Yay!
Hey, yeah, thanks, Debbie. Quick thing about stewardship, it just baffles me that stewardship is part working in and around parks, because that should be a basic, tenet of working in parks. So I definitely appreciate the work of stewardship programs across the city. So now we're going to move on to the individual volunteer award, and that the recipient is Gail Spring, a consummate professional and community advocate. This year's individual volunteer award goes to Gail Spring. Gail has been involved with Friends of the Park for years as an active member of the DuSable Coalition via her engagement with SOAR, the Streeterville Organization of Active Residents. She has never wavered in her commitment and consistency to push for the actualization of DuSable Park, and she keeps taking it to another level. She has previously agreed to leverage her involvement in the Jane Addams Park Advisory Council to help the DuSable Park Coalition seed the DuSable Park PAC, even before there is an actual park. She continues as a member of both PACs today. In addition to these roles, during the pandemic, she leveraged relationships with both the Magnificent Mile Association and the Native American Chamber of Commerce to add new elements to the annual commemoration of the death of DuSable as we innovated to offer virtual elements. This has led to the ongoing involvement of the Native American Chamber of Commerce to offer a blessing and land acknowledgement at the annual event. This is a significant contribution to the coalition's journey to understand, value, and work toward helping us all acknowledge DuSable's wife, Kitty Howard of the Potawatomi tribe, and the fact that DuSable's acceptance into the tribe was very important to his success. It wouldn't have happened without that. That was me editorializing. But this year, Gail accepted the Chicago Park District's invitation to serve on the DuSable Park Framework Plan Steering Committee alongside various members of the DuSable Park Coalition. In that space, she is playing a strong activist role to make sure the significance of Kitty Howard's part and the DuSable story is incorporated into the park concept and design in the face of some controversy around the issue. Also, in 2022, Gail and her husband debuted a film they produced, The History of South Streeterville, which includes strong affirmation of the development of more green space in the area, including DuSable Park. It even includes an interview with Kurt Bailey of the Related Midwest, talking proudly about the future of DuSable Park. Thank you for your leadership, Gail.
Hey.
And now I'm going to move on to the Innovation Award with Rio de Bienvenida Project. I probably slaughtered that, but not many people know how the Canalport Riverwalk Park, tucked between Bubbly Creek, the south branch of the Chicago River, and the Chicago Sanitary and Ship Canal. It's not as famous as the Riverwalk downtown, but this little gem offers views of the Damon Silos, Sims Scrap Metal Recycling, and the Chicago skyline. The Rio de Bienvenida Project, led by artists Cynthia Weiss and Delilah Salgado, and educators Sidlayi Trujillo and Rachel Haverlock, is a public art project seeking to activate this park as a community space that connects people to a body of water that unites the entire city of Chicago while bringing attention to environmental racism and lack of green space in Pilsen, Little Village, McKinley Park, Archer Heights, Brighton Park, and Bridgeport. As neighborhoods plagued with industrial pollution, the project provides an ingenious space for community members to come together and plan for a future with cleaner air and water and create access to green space. And the Chicago Tribune wrote about it, saying, 2 years ago, Sidlayi Trujillo was researching the Chicago River as part of a fellowship at the University of Illinois at Chicago. She remembers looking at the curves and bends of the river on Google Maps and noticing that it cut through her neighborhood of Pilsen. She couldn't find any access points in the area, so she went to look for one. 3 generations of Trujillo's family have lived in Pilsen, but it took some exploration and the help of 3 strangers to find the Canalport Riverwalk Park, a 5-acre park tucked under a bridge over the south branch of the river and surrounded by communities that have long fought for environmental justice. The neighborhoods around here ended up sacrificing their access to the river, but they were also very vital and crucial to building Chicago, Trujillo said. They don't get to experience the benefits of all the infrastructure. They mostly bear the burden. It sounds like Chicago. Nestled between several industrial centers, wild grasses and seating areas line the gravel path following the curve of the river. The air smells of exhaust from trucks passing on Ashland Avenue. Often a few people can be found fishing on the bank or the occasional jogger might pass by. But many in the surrounding neighborhoods of Pilsen, McKinley Park, and Bridgeport said they've never heard of the park. Now Trujillo is part of a project to help residents see this strip of green space as a true park rather than just an industrial zone. The group's vision involves hosting workshops for community members to draw images of water and what environmental justice means to them. First on paper, then converted to pieces of laser cut metal embedded in the fence. At the event in September, some of the sketches submitted by attendees depict fish, smiling children holding hands, and an acknowledgement of Native American tribes that first occupied land near the river. We're excited that this project was funded through Earth Art Chicago that Friends of the Park was part of, which is providing financial support for 11 projects across neighborhoods to help inspire action toward climate change and environmental justice. Thank you to all the individual and organizational partners making this space come to life. Isolation, inspiration. Am I right? Yes, okay. Isolation, inspiration. Awarded to individuals that have been particularly inspiring in their efforts to safely utilize parks and nature for personal, mental, and/or physical health during COVID and to encourage others toward the same. This year awardees are Supervisor Shani McPherson and the staff of Franklin Park. I hope I pronounced your first name correctly. Franklin Park is in the North Lawndale community and provides 9.31 acres of green space. Parkgoers come to play basketball, baseball, and swim at the facility. After school programs are offered throughout the school year, and in the summer, a 6-week day camp. In addition to programs, Franklin Park hosts fun special events throughout the year for the whole family, such as the gym showcases, holiday parties, and back to school community gatherings. Supervisor Shani McPherson and staff work with wide-ranging group of partners to ensure youth and their families have a variety of activities to participate in. These partnerships include Boxing Out Negativity, the local CAPS office, Windy City Hoops, Inner City Hoops, and You Can. The park also has some very unique programs such as piano classes with Ravinia serve as an exhibition site for the Lawndale, A Living History, presented by the Lawndale pop-up spot, as well as a site for a little library in partnership with the Neighbor to Neighbor Literacy Project. Our Friends of the Park C grant awardee and have hosted Equidicity, I can never pronounce that, Equidicity as part of Friday night ride series. Through careful use of the field house and outdoor area, the staff were able to follow COVID safety guidelines, even as they found themselves serving double the number of children during stay at home. The dedication to keeping their partnerships intact has helped the park continue to serve so many additional families safely as guidelines have been eased. For being a beacon in their neighborhood, we recognize Supervisor Shani McPherson and her staff at Franklin Park. And now I'm going to hand it over to my brother and fellow board member, Pete Leckie.
Thank you very much, and thank you for those honorees. Really wonderful. I'm honored to present these last few awards. This one is for the Chicago Park District Employees of the Year, and they will be going to Stephen Bell, the director of the Ford Calumet Environmental Center in Big Marsh Park, and Joel Zavala, senior program specialist at the Ford Calumet Environmental Center in Big Marsh Park. So this year we did something a little different for this award because Stephen and Joel are a truly dynamite team. We first got to know them when we started engaging with Steelworkers Park at 87th and the Lake. This park, which is a fraction of the former US Steel site, is the location of a unique climbing area that was created out of the ore walls that were a portion of the steel mill that once stood there. This park also has walking paths and a naturalized area. Its location makes it ideal for stargazing, bird watching, including being able to see some of the eagles that make that Calumet area their home. While Stephen and Joel approach this work from a very different experiences, they both bring tremendous enthusiasm and a great love of nature and an understanding of what it takes to create great partnerships. Hailing from Little Village, Joel Zavala knows the impact that safe green spaces can have on a community. Fostering the connection between the Southeast Side community and our city's natural areas is at the core of Joel's work. As the senior program specialist for the Ford Calumet Environmental Center, he works to activate and support community programming at all the Southeast Side parks, including Big Marsh, the Marion Burns Park, Steelworkers Park, Indian Ridge Marsh, and the Hegwish Marsh. He leads and facilitates the popular community climbs at Steelworkers Park, where he offers free opportunities for the public to scale the climbing wall. If you've never done it, you should try it. He works with local community, environmental, and faith-based organizations to host a variety of stewardship and cultural events at the Southeast Side sites, such as native tree plantings, bikes and bonfires for local youth and scout groups, and programs with a focus on mental and environmental health. He also contributes partner events, coordinates partner events, such as the 5K Mud Hen Run, the Double Dutch Fest, and Earth Day celebrations. In everything from hiking, birding, to stewardship and management, Joel passionately promotes equitable access, active participation, and local community ownership over our city's Southeast Side green spaces. Congratulations, Joel. Stephen Bell is the director of the Chicago Park District Ford Calumet Environmental Center and Big Marsh Park. During his expansive career as an advocate for sustainability, he has been a proponent for healing and working with the environment. At the Calumet Center, he leads an innovative hub for eco-recreation and environmental restoration on the Southeast Side. The efforts to remediate more than 200 acres of land with a history of industrial waste is no small effort, no small feat. Stephen's commitment to this project and to making this area accessible to the local community shines through in his tireless work. Both of them have gone above and beyond to help Friends of the Parks make our Southeast Side Park activation and environmental education activities a success. From Day of the Dead to rock climbing to Marsh Madness tours and more. Congratulations, Joel and Stephen. Okay, yes. And now finally on to the Smoky Sakurada Friends of the Parks Award. There's a mouthful. And this award is going to be going to the Illinois Institute of Technology professors Maria Villalobos and Ron Henderson, and the students of the Landscape Architecture and Urbanism Design. In honor of a beloved volunteer of Friends of the Parks, the late Smoky Sakurada, we periodically highlight other committed partners that donate time and demonstrate significant commitment to our organization way above and beyond the call of duty. This year's Friends of the Parks are Illinois Institute of Technology professors Maria Villalobos and Ron Henderson, and the students at the Landscape Architecture and Urbanism program. Friends of the Parks Executive Director Juanita Irizarry and Dr. Maria Villalobos met as mayoral appointees to the Lincoln Yards Community Advisory Council and quickly connected and became behind-the-scenes thought and strategy partners in favor of vibrant public parkland there and elsewhere. They realized the connection they both had then to FOTP board members Anton Seal's work in support of the actualization of the Englewood Nature Trail. And the rest is history. Dr. Villalobos has supported FOTP's work directly by participating in and moderating FOTP lecture discussions, and has engaged Juanita to provide a tour and input related to Humboldt Park and the Bloomingdale Trail, and as a jurist in her students' midterms and final presentations related to Humboldt Park, Garfield Park, and the Englewood Nature Trail. Another of her students participated in another lecture and did a presentation about park history as part of an FOTP staff training. Maria has brought us into relationship with IIT's Dr. Ron Henderson, who has engaged his students around a couple of FOTP projects, challenging them to think through real-world applications of landscape design. The first project was a design studio project to offer alternative visions for the future DuSable Park site as a part of inspiring thinking and modeling a public involvement process ahead of the anticipated park district design process for the park. The project included meetings with our DuSable Park Coalition and other stakeholders and attending our summer Death of DuSable commemoration. The process included a virtual lecture presentation and an in-person exhibition of IIT on the students' models at IIT for the students' models of the park. This work has led to an invitation from the Chicago Park District for Ron to serve alongside Juanita and DuSable Park Coalition members on the current DuSable Park Framework Plan, where he is a strong advocate for positions the FOTP cares about, including ongoing agitation for the inclusion of the story of Kittihawa and the Potawatomi tribe as part of the success of DuSable's role in the region. Meanwhile, over this summer, he engaged independent study students to take a look at the confined disposal facility at the confluence of Lake Michigan and the Calumet River and adjacent to Calumet Park, to imagine what it could look like fully converted into a park. The student designs were informed by previous schematics from our Last 4 Miles initiative, Community Charrettes, years ago, as well as updated neighborhood input. Each student vision was unique, and in their presentations, they brought passion and expertise in converging dredge and landfill facilities into parks, slate material, and landscape architecture. The development of updated alternative visions for the CDF site is a major contribution in the fight to close and cap the CDF site, which threatens our lakefront, helping to ensure and galvanize the community in the collective advocacy effort to return the land to community use. Thank you both so much, Maria and Ron, for the wonderful work that you've done and your students.
Thank you so much.
Wow.
Congratulations, everyone. This is wonderful. Thank you, Pete, for helping bring us home on our wonderful awards. And I'm sure folks can see we're at about 2:04, and that's just because there's so much wonderful work happening in our parks. We have struggled to do this luncheon and conference and these awards remotely. Particularly our struggle is that we'd love to be in person, to hear those resounding applause, to shake folks' hands, to give them a little gift back, to give them an award to honor all of their work. So we do hope to follow up with all of our winners, to give you a little something in person, and to be able to shake your hand and to thank you for all of the amazing work that's happening in our parks across the city. So thank you, everyone, for that. We had hoped to end our time today with a discussion about what are the most pressing issues in our parks. But much of that discussion has been happening as we've heard our speakers, as we've heard about our Volunteer in Park Award VIP winners and all the great work they're doing across the city. I know today I heard concerns about privatization of our parks, concerns about the process of how things start to happen in our different parks, the worry that we aren't creating more healthy green spaces across our city and instead adding to the industrial corridors where people don't have enough access, and the processes with that, both at the park district, but at the state and the city level, and how do we fight for those green spaces and for our healthy environment. And also I've heard the inactiveness of our park advisory councils or communities in general, aldermen or other political officials just making decisions on behalf of our communities. These are really important concerns that we hope at Friends of the Parks to lift up in this mayoral and aldermanic cycle. In February, we'll be electing a slew of new officials here in the city, and we want to be sure that they prioritize these park concerns, and they think of parks as a key element of their work and something that they are to advocate for and to consider as they make decisions for their communities. So to do that, we hope to engage many of you in conversations about what are the concerns in our parks that we might put on a questionnaire for mayoral candidates that's citywide, and also aldermanic candidates. We'd also love to partner with park advisory councils and community groups across the city to help you do award specific forum or questionnaire, because while we hear common themes all across the city, we know maybe you want to ask a specific question. Like maybe we talked about the South Shore Nature Sanctuary today and the golf course came up. Maybe someone wants to ask every candidate specifically about their concerns related to the Tigerwood Golf Course and that nature sanctuary. So we'd love to make sure to get those thoughts from you. As we're running over time, I would invite folks to join us this week on December 15th. I'm dropping in the chat for an hour conversation where we might highlight and talk through these concerns at 3 p.m. I've dropped the Zoom link in the chat if you have time, but I also invite you to write any concerns you have or issues in your parks in the chat box right now so that we can continue to gather these ideas and these thoughts. We had a wonderful conversation yesterday. I heard concerns about the budget. Right? Why isn't there money given to aldermen that they then specifically have to give out to their parks in their ward? Why isn't there more participatory process with the park district in their budgeting? We talked a lot yesterday about bathrooms in our small groups, both that there aren't enough in some areas of the city and they're not well kept in other areas of the city. So just would love to hear whatever your concerns are. And today, even seeing what our winners are advocating for, we see many of the issues that folks are talking about. And as we heard about what's going on in Wells Park and at the Chicago History Museum and in Douglas Park and in the Kelley Park community, we got a glimpse of some of the pressing issues that individual communities are facing. But again, we see these cross concerns around process, around how are we involved in the decisions that are made for our parks and who is invited to the table. So just would love to keep hearing those ideas from you and would love for you to be involved in our process of releasing a questionnaire. We're hoping to send that out in January as the election is February 28th. And so if you or your local groups want to also partner to do something word specific, we'd love to help you do that within the new year. So thank you all for coming. And if you want to stick around, we'll leave the room open for a while for folks to drop in any thoughts you have. Or if you'd like to verbally discuss, but I want to just thank everyone who came out today to engage with us about our parks a space for democracy, and how might that be, and how can we make them more democratic spaces, and how can we all engage in the democratic process and fight for our parks across Chicago. So thank you so much for your time, and thank you to everybody.
Thank you so much, everyone. It's so inspiring. Welcome to the world of parktivism. I know Laura said that on her own Facebook page, like, I guess I'm a parktivist now. Yes, you are. I just think it's really important to note that people come to this from such different places, and that's all great and perfect, and we want to celebrate it, right? You know, we're not all environmentalists. Some of us start from that space, some of us start from other spaces, and it's all welcome and it's all great. And thank you so much for being with us. Bye, everyone.
Bye.
And please, as you're leaving, if you have ideas and want to write them in the chat, or if you'd like to stay to have a little informal discussion, we're not going to close the room. But we'll end the Facebook Live. We might end our Facebook Live and want to let those who need to depart head out. So thank you all for coming.